Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Tanya lesson. We start a new book, Lessons in Tanya, Volume 2, and we start in chapter 35, the last third of the Tanya, of Lekutei Amon. In the next 3 chapters, the Rebbe is going to be speaking about the purpose of our life here on earth. And in particular, the chapters are divided in the following. One is, what's the purpose? What is my purpose? The second chapter is why the neshama came down. And the third point the Rabbi is going to address is, it seems that we came down in vain. There is no great achievement after we leave the universe. And I'll expand on that. If you are to ask people, do they ever wonder, why are they here? It's a question that I would say a large segment of society is asking. And people will come up with different answers to do good, to continue the seed, to protect the universe, to inspire, to get inspired. The purpose, the reason I'm here, is also something that people can have an understanding today, and tomorrow it shifts, it changes. So if you ask someone who is 20 years old, why are you here? What do you think his answer would be? To enjoy life, right? When he's 35, what is the purpose? To raise children, right? To take care of the kids, to make sure the wife or the spouse are happy. Ask him when he's 55, what is he going to tell you?
When am I going to retire?
When
am I going to retire?
When am I going to retire? To survive.
Yeah, the golden years.
The golden years.
Yeah.
And then when you're finally 75, what's the purpose?
Hope I get up in the morning.
Here.
Thank God I'm here. What?
Hope I get up in the morning.
Hope I get up in the morning.
Hope we make it to 80.
Legacy, maybe legacy.
Maybe legacy. In other words, we can have a good purpose, but it's temporary. In order for me to get the purpose, we need to look at the maker and ask him, what's the purpose? Once you are understanding here from the maker, it's a purpose that doesn't change between a teenage, a married, raising a family, retired, semi-retired, over-retired. It doesn't change. So chapter 35 is about the neshama. Chapter 36 is more about the universe. Why God created the universe. And chapter 37 is going to give us the purpose by which, or the tool, the mechanism, the vehicle by which we can fulfill our purpose. Once I know my purpose and I know why there is a universe, I can learn how to utilize and serve my purpose in the universe. It's a famous story. I was debating to whether I should say it. About a man goes by a park, a public park, and he sees two men, two workers. One is digging a hole, and once he's done, the other one is filling up the hole. Then they go the next one. A foot, 12 inches farther, the guy is digging a hole. Is it 24 inch? The guy says, yes. Okay. He goes out, the other guy fills in the hole. Then they go to the third one. Anybody heard that story? Come on. You heard that? So the guy goes to the employees, city employees. He said, what are you guys doing? So they say, we'll tell you, we belong to a union. And in the union, we are a group of three. We are a tree. One digs a hole, the second puts the plant in, and the third one covers the plant. Today, the one who puts the plant is sick. So I dig the hole, he fills the hole, and that's how the day goes by. Ali, you heard that, no? Really?
It's a good one. So we want to waste time.
So we are born, we die. We get rich, we get poor. Some of us lose, some of us win. One day I'm happy, the other day I'm sad. At the end of the day, you ask yourself, what is this all about? Are we going to dig holes and fill them up, dig holes and fill them up? So one time I lose, another time I win. This time I'm happy, the other time I'm unhappy. Today I'm at a funeral, tomorrow I'm at a birthday. It seems that there is a routine that it's yin and yang, good and sad, and it keeps going. Life goes on. And one time we got to stop and ask, what is this all about? What's the purpose? Especially realizing that majority of us are Beinoni. Beinoni is someone who never wins. You cannot conquer the evil. A tzaddik, once they conquer the evil, they have no more tests. They can study Torah, they can do good, they can go to a soup kitchen and volunteer. There is no temptation. He's not going to cheat. He's not going to steal money. He's going to make it on time. If he's late, he's going to deduct the fee from the office. He's going to do everything right. The Beinoni, constant war. So if you conquer your evil today, tomorrow is as strong as you was today. No change. And one can ask, what's the purpose? It doesn't seem to change. I'm the same human with the same temptation. There was a famous old. Imagine you have a student that you have to teach. You teach him something, and you ask him, "Did you understand?" He said, "Yeah." And the next day, he says, you ask him, "Do you remember what we studied yesterday?" He says, "I have no idea." And you teach him again. And then the next day, it's the same story. That's what happens with the evil. He says he got the point, and the next day, he forgot. He has no memory. There was a famous Chassid whom I knew. He was a Chabad rabbi in Pittsburgh, Reb Sholem Posner. He has many children, grandchildren who are all rabbis all across the globe. When he retired, he moved to Kfar Chabad. At an old age, he started a day school in Pittsburgh and he influenced the Jewish community. But in the later years, he wanted to take it easy, so he moved to Kfar Chabad. One day, somebody knocked on his door to visit a visitor. And it took him a while to open, so the guy kept knocking and knocking and knocking. Finally, the rabbi opened up the door. And the man says, Rabbi, don't you remember me? So the rabbi says, who are you? And he says, don't you remember me? I'm the first graduate of your school in Pittsburgh from the early 50s. And we together used to go out to reach out to families to sign them their kids. And he says, oh, yeah, I'll tell you, I totally forgot about my life. These days, he says, no part of my body works. My head is totally gone. My limbs, I'm not sure. And there are times I am asking myself, am I alive or perhaps I'm already dead? But he says, I know for sure I'm alive. Why? Because the evil inclination is trying to tempt me to sin. Whenever I wake up, he wants me to commit a sin. And I say, oh, there must be that I'm alive. Because otherwise, I wouldn't have that challenge. In our life, as long as we live, the evil will never get the lesson. It will never change. And the question is, so what for? Why am I here? For what reason God put me through this universe, which is unfortunately, but a very challenging, painful experience, it seems for no purpose. This is what the rabbi is going to talk about. I want to first, so just like there is a famous story, I'm sure you heard that story. There was the Tsar once passed by and he saw a farmer that's harvesting his field, and he was doing such a fine job. So the Tsar says to him, I enjoy watching you with the tool. What do you call the scythe? The scythe, with the scythe. He says, why don't you come to my palace every day for 6 hours? Just imagine the wheat is standing there in front of my chair, and keep cutting wheat, and I'll pay you double. The man says, well, double, why not? He goes to the palace, he's invited, he comes to the Tsar, and he stands there and he starts doing it. How long do you think it was lasted?
Half an hour. 10 minutes.
Half an hour. And the Tsar says to him, why? He says, because I don't see the reward of my efforts. I keep doing, but there is no reward. I don't see the outcome. I don't see the wheat kernels on the ground. The stalks are still imaginary, and therefore I cannot do it anymore. So I would rather make half, but watch how my sweat actually achieves some things. And people, the Rebbe is asking, if I don't see any reward, because as hard as I work today, I will have to do the same tomorrow and perhaps even harder, then what for? What's the reason? Here is what the Rebbe, there is the question, and before we get to the answer, I will share an introduction. So we are on page 464. Let us elucidate still further the term that you may do it. In the verse, for the matter is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. Whereas mentioned, the climax of the verse is its emphasis on action. The Rebbe says the introduction to Tanya is the verse of Deuteronomy that the way to serve God is near you, very near you, me'od, in your mouth, in your heart, and to do. After chapter 37, 38 until 41, the Rabbi is going to talk about emotions, about the heart. Right now, the Rabbi is going to talk about action, to do. Let us also understand in a very small measure the purpose in creating Beinonim, to be and remain forever on the level of Beinonim, for as explained in chapter 14, the souls of the Beni are usually incapable of rising to the level of a tzaddik through their own will and effort. They were created to be Beinonim. Remember, Job said God created evil, wicked, created righteous. That God had created righteous men, righteous meaning people who have no temptation and no difficulty. But everybody else is a Benoni. If I was created a Benoni, I'll forever remain a Benoni, and I cannot change that. In other words, to eradicate evil, it's impossible. If I have a temptation for drinking or substance abuse, all I can do is fight it and fight it and fight it. There's no such thing as eradicating. There's no such thing as saying, that's why people who are, thank God, which by miracle, they are able to overcome those challenges, they have to be extremely careful to stay away and not socialize with such people and not be around the substance. Why? Because a small thing, one thing, will destroy all the hard work. That's the idea of a Benoni. Every morning he's addicted to challenges, temptation, to all kinds of misbehaving that are against Torah. Also, the purpose of their souls descent to this world, being clothed within the animal, an animal soul deriving from the Klippa and Sitracha, the very antithesis to divine soul. Says the Rebbe, why are they coming? The neshama, the soul comes here. Here, the body is a confinement for the soul. The body is the very opposite of holiness. And God has sent a soul here, and the soul is confined and goes through great pain to live in this universe.
So the tzaddik is born a tzaddik.
God chose a tzaddik, yes. Right, God created them. And they had no choice, and it's impossible for someone to become a tzaddik. There are very few exceptions. King David became a tzaddik. Yosef was a tzaddik. By the way, Yosef is the only one who's mentioned as tzaddik in the Torah. Not Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They were tzaddikim. But Yosef is because he overcame the ultimate test, which they did not. Says the Rebbe, since they will not be able to banish the animal soul throughout their lives, nor even dislodge it from its place in the left part of the heart, so that no evil imaginings rise from it to the brain, and as much as in the Beinoni, the essence of the animal soul derived from the klipa remains in its full strength and potency as at birth. Says the Rebbe, the animal soul is as powerful, energized turbo engine today like was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and in 10 years it will be the same. The temptation is not living the human just because we practice to do good, just because I convince the animal soul that it's not the right thing. That would work currently, right now. But tomorrow it will change. It will be totally different. Except that its garments, that is, its form of expression, as evil thought, speech, and action, do not clothe themselves in their body, as mentioned above in chapter 12, where is the Alter Rebbe explained that by means of constant battle with his animal soul, the Beinoni prevents the budding evil of this soul from expressing itself in his thought, speech, and action. However, says the Rebbe, in action, in thinking, in speaking, the Beinoni will not allow the evil to overrule, if he's a Beinoni. But the temptation, the challenge is all there just like day one. How much more so for a wicked person who cannot control his speech, thought, and action, where the evil is in charge? However, since the Beinoni succeeds only in suppressing the garments of the soul, the animal soul, but can never, despite all his efforts, affect any change in the essential evil nature of the animal soul itself, the question arises, as the Rebbe, why then did their soul descend to this world to strive in vain, God forbid, waging war all their lives against their evil inclination, yet never being able to vanquish it? Says Rebbe, so one is, what's my purpose here? Two, it seems that even if I had a purpose, the purpose is not going to be achieved, because I'm going to have the same temptation I had when I was 10 or 15, I'm going to have when I'm 85. It doesn't change. Even if at times I'm able to eradicate the evil from controlling my speech, thought, and action, but it will not change. It will come back tomorrow as strong as was always. And therefore, why did God put us through? What's the purpose? What's the outcome? There is a dispute between Hillel and Shammai, in which Shammai was right. Majority of the disputes between Hillel and Shammai, Hillel is right. The dispute was whether it is a benefit for the soul to come to the world or not. Hillel says it is not beneficial. Is it beneficial? Because the soul can rise above where it came from. Shammai says it's not beneficial because practically speaking, we fail. So it's not beneficial. The fact that the potential is there, okay, but and the Gemara says we rule with Shammai. that if the neshama has a choice, she should choose not to come to the universe. Because the universe is full of temptation and hardship, and most likely meaning 99%, we will not come out on the winning side. The Alter Rebbe explains that differently, but I'm just sharing with you the simple way. And that brings me to a story. There was a thief in the village, and he figures, when is the best time to break into a house? 3 o'clock in the morning. Everybody's, as they call it, baking the second dream already. They're busy, sleeping deep. Those days, they had no sleep apnea. They slept well because they were not fed McDonald's and papaya chicken or whatever. So one day, he picked the rabbi's house. So he climbs quietly. He knows how to climb to the chimney. And down the chimney, he comes into the living room. To his bad luck, the rabbi is sitting there studying Talmud. And as he falls down the chimney, you cannot climb down, you slide. And he comes down in front of him, the rabbi, deep in thought. The rabbi heard the noise, lifts his eyes. He turned to the thief. He says, "No, so you're here because you have a question." What's your question?
How much money can I steal?
The man scratches his head and he says, "Rabbi, I have a big question."
So what's the question?
He's trying.
Jackie Wilson, who sounds like better journey, something else.
The guy scratches his head and says, "Rabbi, I have a big question. My question is, what am I doing here and how am I getting out of here?" So the Alter Rebbe is asking, what am I doing here and how am I going to get out of here? How can we live this universe if after all we're going to come out worse off than the way we came in?
It's hard to figure out what would be one's purpose in life. What's the point? Yeah,
That's what the rabbi is asking.
okay. Let's see if we have an answer.
So again, the first question is, what's my purpose? The second is, all my life, I am facing challenges. Even if I win, it's temporary. I will have the same challenge tomorrow. So at the end of life, if I look back, I failed. I'm not talking about you. You might be holy people, but I'm speaking about myself. I failed most of the time. Very few times I overcame the temptation. So then we turn to God and says, why did you send me? Why did you make me go through all of this difficult journey, which it seems I'm not getting to my destination? Because I'm going to read his commentary, Rabbi Weinberg's commentary, but I think I summarize. You know what? Let's continue. What the rabbi is going to answer is that the Zohar, it's based on a statement in Zohar. By the way, this is going to be weaved into every chapter now. So you've got to pay attention. The Zohar says that godliness, divine godliness, appears above the head of every human being. And the human being is compared to a candle. A candle possesses 3 components when it's lit. A, the oil itself. B, the wick. 3, the flame. Which part is the most important? Huh?
Oil.
But I say the flame, because without the flame, there's no brightness, there's no purpose. The purpose of the candle is to brighten up the room or to bring heat. The wick or the oil does not do it, it's the flame. In order for the flame to stay here, it needs to be held. Something has to catch it, and that's the wick. The wick cannot be consumed. The wick will get consumed at the end when the oil is gone. As long as you have oil, the wick has to stay around. The only part that needs to be consumed in order for the flame to exist is the oil, right? No oil, no flame. Why? It needs to survive. Like my body has to constantly have oxygen. Oil, flame needs oil to be consumed. It needs to consume the oil continuously without a stop. When you block the oil from coming to the flame, towards the flame vanquish, extinguish, because there's no food for the flame. So again, you have three components: flame, wick, and oil. Says the Rebbe. The flame is godliness. The wick is the body. The godliness can stay in this universe only in a body. If you don't have a human body, there is no godliness. And the oil are the mitzvot, or the good deeds in action. This is going to be dedicated into action. So whenever I do good, even though my intention was bad, even though I hate it and I resented, I poured oil into the flame. More action, greater the flame. On purpose, I have omitted the neshama. We cannot include the neshama, the soul, now. The Rabbi is going to address the soul in a moment. In a moment, meaning, I believe, next chapter. Without the soul. So again, you have the three components: the flame, the wick, and the oil. The oil is the action. It has to constantly be fed if the flame should be around. But the flame alone with action cannot, the action cannot happen unless there is the wick, which is the human body that holds the flame. Once you have the body, it holds the flame. The action will be fed into the flame. Now, every component that can be consumed by the flame will feed the flame. Can I put a piece of metal and or cement or earth instead of oil? The answer is, why not?
Doesn't burn.
Why it doesn't burn? So here is Kabbalah. I did not study secular studies in yeshiva when I grew up. So I don't know the biology and the DNA. I have no clue. Here is the way the Rebbe, from the Rebbe, I understand. The material of soil, dry soil or metal, is so strong that it cannot be broken and be consumed by the flame. Oil, gasoline, plastic, paper, the component can be consumed by the flame, and therefore it will feed the flame. Anything that's not as hard, as soft to be consumed by flame, cannot hold the flame, cannot feed the flame. Did you understand what I say? Does it make sense? I hope, even if it didn't, it's okay. You don't have to agree to that. So if I fill up the bottle, instead of oil, I put in the candle soil, dirt. Or I put in metal, a bunch of coins, the flame will not be consuming that, cannot break it apart, and therefore cannot be fed by it. But if I take a tree, and I chop it into small pieces that it can be consumed by the flame will do that. Is that clear? Heidi? He's doing a firing.
I'm feeding my other self. Speech, thought, and action.
Perfect.
So based on the Zohar, a human being is a candle by which God lights the universe. The flame is godliness, but flame in the middle of the air does not exist and needs to have physical object to hold on. And my body is the wick that holds it. The wick will be consumed when there is no more oil, when there is no more mitzvot or Torah to do. That's when the wick will be totally consumed. That's why it's not the soul. We're not talking about the soul. And therefore, after life, we put the body to rest and it turns into earth. It will totally be consumed. As long as the person can feed the flame, as long as I can do a mitzvah, which is equal to oil, the flame will hold through my wick, the body, which is the wick. Now, the more good deeds, the bigger the flame. That's the concept the Zohar is talking about, and that's the purpose. In essence, we're going to read about it in details, but what the Rebbe is going to tell us that put aside your desires, put aside your temptation, and do. When you do, what you do is you ignite the flame, you make the flame go bigger. That's all that God wants. The fact that my temptation is stronger or is equal when I was a teenage have nothing to do with the fact that I can feed. I can pour oil, I can feed, convert to oil all my good deeds and allow the flame to go bigger. There was a famous, yeah.
You said, what is more important, the flame? I would say the three things, because one without the other doesn't exist.
They all are part of the puzzle. One without one of them, there is no.
So the three things are important.
But from the three,
Yeah.
the part that is the most important, you know why? Because they all serving the flame. The wick is there for what? Holding the flame. The oil is there for what? Feeding the flame. In other words, the flame is the most important. The flame is God. The wick is body, and the oil is my good deeds, my action. There was a famous Rabbi Hillel of Parich. He wasn't a rabbi, he was a chassid, but he's one of the Beinonim. The description of Benoni was told about him. Very holy man. And when he was 2 years old, a visitor, a famous rabbi, Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, came to visit the town. So his father took him, 2 years old, to see the face of a tzaddik. And when he came close, the child, 2 years old, turned to his father and says, "Who is this big man?" This rabbi, Reb Nachum, was very tall. So the child asked his father, "Who is this tall man?" And the father says to him, "That's Zaidi." Zaidi, grandpa. Generally speaking, to children, everyone who is a very special sage, you call him Zaidi. It's like a brother. You tell people, oh, how are you, brother? Am I your brother? No, but I care about you like brother. In Hebrew, we say achi. Achi is like a slang for closeness. So the child says, "I see a flame above his head." He said it loud. "I see a fiery flame above his head." So the rabbi, upon hearing the child speak, turned to his father and says, "Look at this child and watch him very carefully." What he meant to say is he's going to grow up to be a very holy man because he was able to see the spiritual flame. Now, there is a whole science today. You can go to see auras, different auras. Anybody heard about auras? Green aura, red aura, orange aura, purple aura. Anybody? Yeah, there are devices. You can go and scanners. They have scanners today. They can tell you if you're a positive person, if you're negativity, if you have... regardless of what is all about, the Zohar tells us that the flame, godliness, rests above the head of every human being. And the more mitzvot, now we understand, the more good deeds we achieve, we fulfill, the bigger the flame. Simple as that. Here it is, the Rebbe's explanation. Let this forthcoming explanation be the solace to comfort them in a double measure of aid, and to gladden their hearts in God, who dwells among them in the Torah and divine service. That is, the explanation will show them how to find comfort and joy in the godly light that abides within them when they study the Torah and when they engage in the service of God. Says the Rebbe, the above-mentioned difficulties will be resolved by clarifying first the comment of the Yenuka. Yenuka is a child. Child means the young son. Quoted in the Zohar, Parshat Balak, it is the son of Rav Imnona. And the verse, the wise man's eyes are in his head. The Torah, the book of Proverbs says that the eyes of the wise man's eyes are in his head. And the rabbi in Zohar asked, what do you mean in his head? Is it not in his head? Everyone's eyes are in their head. It's not in their arm or legs. The Zohar comments, where else are men's eyes? Surely then the meaning of the verse is as follows. We have learned that a man must not go 4 cubits while bareheaded. Why? Because the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests upon his head. The Zohar and Code of Law tells us that men must cover their head continuously. Why? Because God is above the head. And if God is above the head, the covering of the head is to remind us that someone is right above us. Therefore, every wise man has his eyes, that is, his interest and concern, and hence also his speech concentrated in his head, that is, in that light of the Shekhinah which rests and abides above his head. And that's what the Zohar says. The wise man's eyes are in his head, meaning he always pays attention to what's going on above my head. Now, when his eyes, that is, his interest and his concern are there, he must know that this light kindled above his head, that is, the light that shines upon his soul, requires oil. For man, all that is Zohar, not the Rebbe. For man's body is the wick that retains the luminous flame, and the light is kindled above it. And thus King Solomon cried out, saying, let there be no lack of oil above your head. King Solomon says, make sure there is no lack of oil. For the light over his head requires oil, meaning good deeds. The good deeds that man performs are the oil which supplies the light illuminating his soul. And for this reason, the wise man's eyes are in his head to ensure that he never lacks oil, good deeds for this light. The quotation from the Zohar ends here. So far you understand what the Zohar said? Zohar said, the flame, meaning Shekhinah, divine presence, is over the head. It's a flame, it's a light. And the light can exist by holding on to a wick. The wick is the body, and the flame can be supported through the oil, through the igniting material, which is the good deeds. Says the Rebbe, the meaning of this analogy, comparing the light of the Shekhinah to the light of a candle, is clear to a very intelligent person, as the Alter Rebbe will conclude shortly after a closer examination of its details, just as it is true of the candle's flame. Says the Rebbe, the candle's flame that it does not shed light, nor is it retained by the wick without oil. By nature, fire strains upwards. It will not remain below unless restrained by a wick or wood, for example. But a wick alone is rapidly consumed, and the fire vanishes quickly. Moreover, the burning wick produces a dim and smoky light, for it consists of material insufficiently refined to be completely absorbed by the flame. Oil, on the other hand, is completely transformed into the flame and absorbed by it. Burning steadily, it produces a pure and clear light. So having a wick alone without oil will burn the wick and produce smoke and very small light. But if I have oil, that will feed onto the light it will produce a very bright light. This is what is meant by the Alter Rebbe's statement that without oil the flame of the candle A does not shed light, and B, nor is it retained by the wick. Returning to the point of the analogy. Similarly, the Shekhinah does not rest upon man's body, which is compared to a wick, except through man's performing good deeds. The body can only act as a wick, not as oil. It is a coarse physical being which will not be absorbed within the light of the Shekhinah, but will always remain separate from it. The good deeds that man performs provide the oil, and therefore it is evident from the Zohar, however, that one's soul, although a part of God above, is insufficient to serve as oil for the wick. You cannot use the body as oil like the wick because it will not provide good light and it will be extinguished very quick. And you cannot use the neshama, the soul, as oil because the oil has to be fed to the flame. The neshama needs to stay around. Therefore, the soul is not the oil. The burning material must be the good deeds. The good deeds that we perform continuously are the flame, the fuel that lights the menorah, the light. A question is implied here. Why should the soul itself, divine and thus certainly suited as being absorbed within the light of the Shekhinah, require anything external such as good deeds to serve as oil for that light? Surely the soul itself should constitute the oil. Says the Rebbe, that's not the case, as I told you before, because oil has to be consumed by the flame. The neshama cannot be consumed. The neshama needs to stay for the Earth's mission. But the reason for this, Alter Rebbe now concludes the sentence begun earlier with the words. The meaning of this analogy is clear and understandable to every intelligent person. The Alter Rebbe will now proceed to explain why good deeds can serve as oil for the light of the Shekhinah, whereas the divine soul cannot. The explanation in brief. Here is what the Rebbe is explaining. Man's soul is not, after all, completely nullified before God and one with Him to the extent that it is capable of becoming absorbed within the godly light. This is true even of the soul of the tzaddik who serves God with the loftiest form of love and fear. Indeed, it is the soul's very love of God that emphasizes its separateness. For love entails two separate entities, the lover and the beloved. Similarly with fear, there is one who fears and another who is feared. Only good deeds, mitzvot, which, as Alter Rebbe will explain further on, are completely one with God, can therefore serve as the oil which is absorbed within the flame of the light of the Shekhinah that is kindled over man. So did you understand what I said? Very good. Let me just summarize just in case it's not clear. There he says, oil, remember I told you about material, metal material or soil will never be where, because it cannot unite. It's not soft enough to be united and fed by a soul. Imagine I'm fed metal. My body needs a fish. The fish has to be cooked. Steak, it needs to be cooked because it has to be softened. If I eat it raw, I won't be able to digest it. I'll have a stomachache. If I eat coins, I will throw it up because my body cannot digest it. A flame, the flame can only exist when it digests something that becomes parcel of the flame. Just like food becomes part of who I am. What comes out is the extra waste, but the food that I eat turned into energy because it is united with my body. When I have oil in a candle, that oil needs to be of material that is soft enough, that is comparable to the flame, that it can be consumed completely by the flame and become one. That's the uniqueness, that's the key component, become one with the flame. Says the Rebbe, what happened to something that cannot become one with the flame? It will not allow the flame to burn because it cannot unite with the flame. That's why the soul cannot be the fuel that fuels the soul, the flame, because the soul is separate from godliness. This, no matter how close we are to God and how holy I am, I can be a tzaddik and I love God dearly, or I fear God. Love and fear denotes two entities. I cannot love myself. People say I love myself too much, so I buy myself gifts. But it's a borrowed term. It's not true. Love applies to another entity outside of me. And therefore, fear is the same thing. Therefore, a soul is always removed from God to a certain extent. Some are very far removed, some are very little removed, but it's separated from God. When it comes to good deeds, on the other hand, it's all godliness, because it's all about action. If it's action, it can be united with God, just like oil or small chips of wood can ignite and become the fuel for the flame. And therefore, says the Rebbe, neshama cannot be the fuel. I gave you another reason, because the fuel has to be consumed by the flame. The fuel has to be united and totally consumed. And neshama needs to exist, cannot be consumed. And therefore, God created it separate from God on purpose, so it cannot be fed to be fueling the flame. I hope you understand. Therefore, says the Rebbe, it's impossible for the soul to fuel the flame, only oil. What is oil? Good deeds. Let's read a little more. For the soul of a man, even if he be a perfect tzaddik, who serves God with fear and with a pleasurable love, that is, his love consists of delighting in the experience of godliness, a most lofty form of love, it is nevertheless not utterly nullified out of existence, so that it might be dissolved into and absorbed within God's light, to be immersed within it in perfect unity. You cannot be absorbed, the soul cannot be totally absolved to become part of the flame. It is rather a separate entity which fears God and loves him, since it is not absorbed within godliness, as oil is absorbed within a flame. The soul cannot serve as oil for the light of the Shekhinah. Not so with mitzvot and good deeds, which are God's will, each commandment representing God's desire that a particular act be performed. Now, God's will is the source of life for all the worlds and the creatures. They live only because God so desired. The difference between the divine will. Okay, before we move on, what the rabbi is saying, again to summarize, you have a flame, godliness, above the human. The human being is the wick, and the good deeds are the oil that feeds. The neshama cannot absorb by the flame, and therefore it will not serve as fuel. However, good deeds will serve as fuel. Now we can understand, as the rabbi is going to continue to say, action is what is demanded, and therefore by doing action in that way, there's no difference between the most righteous and the most simplest person. We all doing the same equally. So you have someone in Siberia who's sent there for 10 years for labor camp, and he wants to eat matzah and Passover, and he's trying very hard and there isn't. And he found small cubes of sugar, 3 cubes of sugar. He says the Agada, whatever he knows, and then he says, "May it be you will, as if I ate matzah." Whereas someone else, a teenage, that his father says to him, "If you ever want to borrow my car, you better sit at the Seder and eat matzah." And he says, "I hate you, but I'll do it because I want the car." And his father says, "Before you go out with my car, you sit down and eat a half a matzah." And he ate a half a matzah. He hates it with a passion. Who fulfilled the mitzvah? The teenager. We know the other one wanted very much, and he suffered for not being able to serve God. But the oil to feed the flame is action. So the teenager who did it against his will for a side reason, he did it, and therefore he fed his soul with the flame. That's why we tell somebody, you have a lot of questions, and some questions I don't have answer, and some questions you might be right, have nothing to do, this have nothing to do with action. Just do it. Just do the mitzvah. Ignite, build more flame. When you have more flame, hopefully it will impact the human being. We'll stop here and continue next week, Adurim. Thank you very much, everybody.